Ahead on America This Week.
We advanced more law enforcement officers there who were not seen. They were inside the courthouse and did not come out for days.
I'm talking one-on-one with the acting Deputy Secretary for Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli.
Americans fundamentally don't like that. We are a law and order society, is what my father stands for.
You also don't want to miss my interview with the Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization, Eric Trump. The founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, also joins me.
If this makes its way to Kentucky, we're talking about $1,000 an ounce.
$200,000 right here. 200 grand.
And you don't want to miss highlights from my trip to the border. That's coming up on America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. I'm Eric Bolling. The protests and the pandemic continue to put our nation into a proverbial barrel roll. Every week, I work to get the truth from our leaders. The summer of discontent rages on. Our cities are under siege by the violent leftist mobs. Portland is going on 70 straight days of mayhem. Shots rang out on city streets, not a normal thing in Austin, Texas. And in Colorado, protesters opened fire on this vehicle trying to pass through the crowd blocking the highway. Those shots missed their target, hitting fellow protesters across the roadway. Yep, it's the summer of discontent, and it rages on. Statues are still being vandalized. Buildings are still being defaced. I'm beginning to think these anarchists are enjoying this mayhem.
Is it time to end the American experiment and then start all over again?
I think that we have to burn it down.
Yep, it's crazy time in America, folks. Can someone explain to me why I'm allowed to do this? Masks appear to be optional, and social distancing isn't 6 feet, more like 6 centimeters. Somehow that's acceptable. But sitting in an open baseball stadium, watching a ball game with my family or friends would be too dangerous. Instead, we can pay $50 to have a picture of ourselves sitting in our own seats. Gotta love the fans who send pictures of their dogs instead of themselves. Very unselfish of you all. Have we all lost our minds? You know, I was thinking the other day, what if I said 6 months ago, I told you, hey folks, in a couple of weeks, this was all going to be happening. The beaches, most of them are going to be closed. Some are open, but for those, you're going to be required to wear a mask, even in the water. In fact, you're going to have to wear a mask just about everywhere you go. Unless, of course, you're a protester, then you can pretty much do whatever you want, because being for tearing stuff up is way more woke than being for law and order. Bars aren't for socializing. I'm just not sure what they're for anymore. Grandma has been in quarantine for months. You can't visit her, but you can wave to her through the window. It's now okay to kneel for the national anthem or just walk off the court while the anthem is being played. The Washington football team changed its name. It's now called the Washington football team. Police are canceled, but crime is not. Statues are racist and must be torn down, even the ones depicting anti-slavery icons like Abraham Lincoln and, get this, Frederick Douglass. You get paid to not go to work. School is canceled, work is canceled, bills are canceled, rent is canceled. Basically, America is canceled. And Kanye West is tied for second place for president. Hey, President West, I'd love to be your VP. Hey, come on now. What's wrong with that? Wearing a mask in the water is okay, but me and Kanye, too crazy for 2020? I think not. Yep, 6 months ago, if I had told you these things were happening in America, you'd call in a doctor and Baker Act me. But then I thought, you know what? Maybe this is just a really bad dream I'm having. That must be it. I'm in the middle of a really, really crazy nightmare. Any minute, I'm going to wake up and 2020 is actually going on as scheduled. You know, it's August, so a bunch of beautiful celebrities are showing off on beautiful beaches around the world. The Mets are in last place, obviously. Some great movies are crushing it in the movie theaters. Summer concerts are awesome. The Chainsmokers' annual Hamptons concert is a fan favorite. And Biden versus Trump is in full swing. The candidates are bringing out huge crowds at the rallies, crisscrossing the country. 2020, it's all back to normal, right? That summer of discontent thing, that was just a really, really bad dream, right? Right? This week, Department of Homeland Security made a big announcement when it comes to the violence in Portland. Joining me now is the Acting Deputy Secretary for Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli. Welcome back to the show, Secretary. Secretary, tell us a little bit about the negotiation you made with the Governor of Oregon.
Sure. So this week, we have been talking with Governor Brown of Oregon. We have not had any cooperation in the last few weeks from the governor, the state police, and it continues with the mayor of Portland. But this week, after talking to the vice president, the governor began talking to us about a partnership. And this week, we're advancing a partnership between her state police and our federal law enforcement officers responsible for protecting the courthouse that you've seen under siege in Portland for the last few weeks. And this is all in the context of 2 months of straight violence in Portland. So this return of partnership, which is what we have everywhere else in the country, is good news for peace and the prospects for it in Portland and for the citizens and businesses of Portland, where there's been tens of millions of dollars of damage by these rioters and criminals. To finally have the state police stepping forward is a real plus.
You know, and I just have to ask, because it strikes me as Portland being the city, the mayor, Ted Wheeler, you point out, has been, I guess, a thorn in the side of the administration, saying, no, you guys leave. You're the reason, pointing the finger at the Trump administration, Homeland Security, for the violence in Portland. Please walk us through that. Is the agitation coming from the federal officers in Portland?
Absolutely not, and I'm glad you asked. So Portland is the only place in America where there has literally been violence every day since the George Floyd murder, which was abominable, and there's plenty to talk about and to protest, for instance, to demonstrate coming out of that situation. That we all want to protect. That does not make the kind of rioting and violence and criminal activity and domestic terrorism we've seen take place in Portland acceptable. In May and June, there was violence every single day after the George Floyd murder. On 3 of those days total, the target of that violence in Portland was federal facilities. In July, it has been every single day. And so after that went on for several days in a row, and we had intelligence that that was going to continue and escalate, we advanced more law enforcement officers there who were not seen. They were inside the courthouse and did not come out for days during their patrol period. So the notion that we somehow escalated this is quite backwards. It's a talking point. The mayor said we caused the violence until we pointed out it had been going on for 5 weeks before any of our additional officers showed up. So he changed his talking point, and the mainstream media has followed suit to say we made it worse. Well, we didn't make it worse. We made it better.
Mr. Secretary, you know, Bill Barr was on Capitol Hill testifying, answering to what looked like a circus going on by the Democrats. But he pointed something out very important. He was asked about what was being used, tear gas, pellets. What are the rules of engagement when a federal officer goes into a city to protect federal buildings like they have been doing in Portland?
So we're there under a statutory command from Congress to protect these buildings. And the rules of engagement essentially are what they are for any other police force. It's you don't escalate the force, you match the level of force you're confronted with as best you can. And we have never gone beyond a less than lethal level of force, things like tear gas, sometimes rubber bullets deployed, nothing above that level. And those have been deployed in relatively limited fashion. So that's the rules of engagement we've operated under. We have made arrests. We've made scores of arrests. But I'll tell you what tells the tale in terms of our restraint. 240 plus federal officer injuries. You know how many for the violent criminals? 4. 4. So to our 240 plus our medical personnel have rescued a variety of people in Portland who were suffering medical harm, and including one person who had just been arrested for attacking law enforcement officers immediately had a seizure, it was our medical personnel who stepped forward. We had to clear the crowd to take care of this person. That's the attitude of the Department of Homeland Security officers that are there and the quality of their work there. They've done commendable work to protect this seat of justice, and they've been doing it according to the law and within the boundaries of our authority.
You know, and I think that's something that sometimes is lost in the translation, that a lot of times these officers are actually saving lives while they're being, you know, fighting to protect federal buildings and lives inside the buildings as well.
And saving the lives of the people attacking
Right,
them.
that's what I meant. That's the point I was trying to make. Mr. Secretary, who are the people protesting? Who are you finding they are? Is it Black Lives Matter? Is it Antifa? Is it other anarchists? Who are the ones you're running up against?
You know, it's interesting. First of all, we all support peaceful protesting and demonstrations. The president is adamant about that. In the Department of Homeland Security, we've been adamant about that. That's part of what we're protecting, is that opportunity. What we all oppose in this administration, though it's not clear that other politicians oppose it, is violence mixed in or by itself with protesting. And, you know, this started after the George Floyd murder, which was appalling, sad, terrible. I could use a whole lot of descriptions. And there's plenty to talk about coming out of that. But the people we're dealing with go by a variety of names, whether it's the organization of Black Lives Matter, whether it's Antifa, whether there are these other groups that go under different and often changing names so that they're harder to keep track of. That's an intentional tactic. They all have two things in common. They dislike the United States. Hate might not be too strong a word. And they're willing to use violence.
All right.
And those are unacceptable when combined in this country. And the federal government will continue to stand against that.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going over and my producer's going to kill me. I just need a 20-second answer from you. Do we have any idea who's funding these groups?
At this time, we have not seen or discovered any coordinated funding effort. We have seen resupply and lots of materials, so we know there's money involved. But we don't know whether it's the people who are coming to riot or whether there are other people funding them. We don't have an answer to that as we sit here.
All right, Ken Cuccinelli, appreciate your time. Thank you again, and stay safe. And to all your officers,
good to be with you.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Absolutely not. I do not support defunding police, and I never have. What I support is strong and serious reforms of police departments, which most of the serious police officers in the country support. And we should have transparency in what in fact occurs within police departments as it relates to accusations of brutality and or violating people's rights.
Mike Solan is the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild and knows all too well how protests can turn violent. When you see those images of violent protests coming from your city and others like Portland, what is your reaction? Let's talk about Seattle a little bit here, Mike. The mayor, Jenny Durkan, has said with Trump bringing federal officers into the city of Seattle, it's a dry run for martial law. You say what?
Well, I would say the dry run was what we saw with Chaz and Chop experience, where there was over 2 people dead and 6 people shot with multiple heinous crimes. But that's why it's so important for the ignored majority, the reasonable majority of Seattle citizens and the entire state of Washington and people across the nation to wake up to what's occurring. I need them to go to stopdefunding.com and help us, because they're looking at defunding us by 50%. And if you remove 50% of our budget, that's over 800 cops gone, which would make the Chaz Chop experience look like child's play, because crime will skyrocket. This is a major issue, and Seattle and Portland are the epicenter of unreasonable activism, political ideology, pushing a neo-Marxist agenda that has every one of us on edge. And last Saturday, we had 60 cops get hurt. And I have yet to hear a public official, an elected one, to show concern about the officers and their well-being. It's absolutely egregious what's occurring in Seattle.
Well, you may hear them, but they're certainly not. They don't have a D next to their name, because they're not. They're calling these things, and we're rolling pictures of this stuff, they're calling this peaceful protest, when we all know, logically, you look at that and you know there's nothing peaceful about that. I asked Ken Cuccinelli, who these people are and who's funding them. Do you have any idea who you're up against? I know they're calling themselves Black Lives Matter, but I see Antifa. I see the Antifa flag way too much. Other agitators. Do you know who you're pushing back and who's funding them?
Well, absolutely. They're well-funded. They're well-organized. This is Antifa. And these are people that are holding a reasonable majority, the ignored majority, hostage by their political activism. But let's be clear. They're not a big group of people, but yet they have control of the public safety political discourse, not just in Seattle, but it's in Portland. It's in almost every major urban area where we're seeing this type of violence, criminal actions. And I've referred to it as domestic terrorism on my Twitter feed at Real Mike Solan. I mean, this is a serious issue that everybody in our nation needs to wake up. This is what's coming, and this is all about November. But sadly, cops are in their crosshairs or are being hurt. Like I just mentioned to you earlier, Eric, I had 60 people, officers, get injured. We're talking about improvised explosive devices, metal objects, wood, frozen water bottles, anything they can get their hands on to push their political agenda.
You know,
we must stop back.
Let me, and the reason why I'm doing this is this show is national. So we're going to be in you know, hundreds of places around the country, cities, towns. Talk to the people right now who are watching what's going on in Seattle and Portland, saying, you know what, I agree with the right to protest, but what does this mean? And what's really striking me is your mayor, Mayor Jenny Durkan, was all for it until they showed up at her house. But what happens when this shows up on Main Street America?
What happens when they show up on Main Street America is that people are going to be expecting police to be there. But guess what? We won't be there if the Seattle City Council, the activist fringe, the majority, pushes forth their ideology and their activism by defunding us by 50%. There won't be a police officer there in a timely manner to help you. That's why what's occurring in Seattle needs to be on everybody's radar nationwide. This neo-Marxist agenda is coming to your doorstep, and I've said it before. They're no longer at the threshold of our doors. They've breached the door. They're inside. That's why if you want to help out, please visit us at stopdefunding.com. Got to get involved. Become the reasonable activists and push back against this political ideology.
Right. Mike, I have about 20 seconds or so, and just really be concise about this. How in the world do you train your officers to hold back when they have people, young people, pointing their finger at them and shouting names at them? Very quickly.
Well, we're consummate professionals. We did an oath of service to serve to the community. We're willing to give our lives in the service of that oath. And yet, even when we're besieged by this type of activity, we're going to continue to serve. That's the type of human being that police are. We're great people.
All right, we're going to leave it right there, Mike Solan. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I was granted never-before-seen access to the border recently. The director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Jim Carroll, and I toured the border by all means, by land, where we witnessed methamphetamine with a street value of $1 million seized from a vehicle's bumper while our cameras were rolling, by air via Black Hawk helicopter, and by sea in speedboats tasked with running down cigarette boats filled with cocaine, to a drug smuggling tunnel that connected the drug cartels in Sinaloa to the warehouses of San Diego, California. Here's a quick highlight reel of the tour.
Runway 27 cleared for takeoff. About delay, clear for takeoff, 37, Southwest 1594. Can I get a thumbs up from everybody if you can hear me? Excellent, excellent.
If you can see out the right window, we've got a lot of really beautiful marinas out here. But one of the threats that we have that's coming into this area is the recreational vessels that come into these marinas bringing in loads of contraband, also illegals.
Do we know how much is here?
7.32 kilos. If this makes its way to Kentucky, we're talking about $1,000 an ounce.
$200,000.
Right here.
200 grand. It's a lot of drugs that can fit in there. A lot of drugs.
280 pounds of cocaine could fit into this gas tank.
So this is This is Officer Gun right here. I don't want to touch Officer Gun because you're not supposed to touch the officer dogs.
Basically, their job is to patrol what we call pre-primary out here, and what they're looking for are all the odors of drugs that they are trained on.
So this was actually a tunnel we discovered in 2013, almost 1,800 feet. Went over there and took a right turn in there and went to a warehouse across the street over in there. It's a pretty relatively average sized tunnel at the time in there.
And so this is the drug tunnel, legit drug tunnel. You can see the jackhammer. You can see how it's carved out with machinery. You can see the track. It's a metal track used for trolley for transporting drugs from Mexico into the United States. Above us, Mexico into the United States.
They used to call this ambush alley because they would wait for Border Patrol to come by. They would literally be ambushed by the traffickers, driving them away so they could do the human trafficking and do the drug trafficking.
So you can see this is old fence. This was installed in the 90s, I'm told. Smugglers could cut through the mesh, crawl right through. Here's the new fence. Thick steel. No one's cutting through this. Nothing's getting through this. Amazing what people will do to smuggle drugs into America. We have hours of stunning footage we're still going through. I'll bring that to you as soon as possible. Earlier this week, I met up with Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, at the Freedom Summit at Trump Hotel in D.C. He made a big announcement with Liberty University. Take a listen.
Yeah, well, it's at Liberty University, which is the only college in the country I put my name behind, which says something, because I probably traveled to more college campuses than almost anyone in kind of the conservative circuit or the conservative movement. Liberty's amazing, and Jerry became a dear friend in the last couple of years, and we kind of agreed that Christians need to be more vocal, especially in times like this. My goodness, was our original thesis proven true that Christians need to understand the link between first principles and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that we need to be vocal in the public square, informed, and really fight for what is right and what is true in the world. And so, God bless Jerry Falwell and Liberty for making this incredible center happen, the Falkirk Center for Faith and Liberty. We're here.
A think tank?
Yeah, well, it's more like, it's a battle tank in some ways. You know, it's think tank, battle tank. It's trying to activate Christians in the social media sphere, in the digital sphere, to explain to Christians that might be a little confused what are the first principles of our country: freedom of speech, freedom of association, the ability to protect yourself, privacy rights, and what does that have to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ? And we actually make the connection that these come from the greatest book, most important book ever to exist, the Holy Bible.
Let me take you there, okay?
Sure.
So we're seeing a lot of protests going on around the country. I have to assume in Jesus' days, he was walking around, it would feel somewhat similar to what's going on. It's different, though.
Well, I mean, look, I think it's different. I mean, I think that people have always been vocal. And look, I am a huge supporter of people being able to speak their mind. What I have no tolerance for is using your position of strength to damage the weak. When you go after someone's business, when you go after somebody's private property, I think that is immoral and wrong. And even beyond that, when you see Christian pastors that I think wrongly tried to put their name behind this movement, that's where we say that that's a no-go zone, and we actually try to explain exactly why.
Tell us where the link or the crossroads between Christianity and conservatism happens.
Well, first of all, you know, being a conservative, you want to preserve Western civilization and preserve this amazing gift that we've been given, the United States of America. But we have to understand who founded America and the ideas that they really founded this country on. And that was taken directly from the Bible, the liberation of the individual. It says very simply in the Bible, it's actually all throughout the campus of Liberty University, where the Spirit of the Lord is present, you have liberty. This idea of you as an individual matter. It's not a matter of where you come from, your skin color. You're actually all made in the image of God is something that built Western society. And we talk about this at the Falkirk Center for Faith and Liberty. So the argument that we make is that we have to understand our history as a Judeo-Christian country. And I think we've gotten away from that in the last couple of years.
Do conservatives own the biblical way more than non-conservatives?
I don't want to be as bold to say that, but I think that conservatives need to re-embrace the ideas of Western society and of the Bible. And that also means acting with compassion and love and connectedness, but also there's a misrepresentation at times that we have to be tolerant of all things. I am not tolerant of people exploiting the weak. I am not, especially when people have, in the last couple of weeks in our country, gone around and burned down businesses of minority-owned entrepreneurs, or gone all across our country to misrepresent this incredible country that we've been given. So we talk about all of this at the Falkirk Center for Faith and Liberty.
And very quickly, this event, just tell us a couple of big headlining names besides yourself and Jerry Fall. Is Jerry Fall going to be here?
Jerry is not, but we have Congressman Dave Bratt, obviously, who's helping host this. Several members of Congress.
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, yes, exactly. Sebastian Gorka and many others that are here, and some other names as well that I think are going to be piping in digitally. But I'll tell you, this is a pretty big unveiling, considering the time that we live in the midst of this pandemic and these lockdowns. And so we're really proud of the kind of rollout that we've had here.
I'm hearing buzzers. I think they need you on stage, Charlie Kirk. Thank you very much
Thanks,
for your
Eric.
time.
Appreciate it.
Ahead on America This Week, he's the third child of the Commander-in-Chief and the Executive Vice President for the Trump Organization. Stay right here for my one-on-one with Eric Trump. And next week, it's an interview you won't want to miss. I'm sitting down with my former colleague and very good friend, Sean Hannity. We'll discuss all the latest in politics, coronavirus protests, and his new book. Finally, we want to make sure the Biden campaign knows we're ready, willing, and able to accommodate an interview with the former vice president or a representative of his campaign anytime, anywhere. We've asked every week for months, but we still haven't gotten a response.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers facts, not falsehoods.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I appreciate the opportunity to clear some of it up.
Hard-edged opinions.
We can no longer rely on China to be the primary producer of so many critical products that we need at a time of crisis.
Tough topic debates.
Has the mainstream media vetted Joe Biden the way they vetted others on the right?
I just believe that all women have the right to speak their truth and that those truths should also be investigated. The end, regardless of what political party they are a part of.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Fighting COVID-19.
We're working with every single state to be able to detect outbreaks before they spread into the community.
And the path forward.
Getting back to some degree of normality, that will come. We will get over this.
America This Week investigates chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
The poisoning of America.
It's in the soils, it's in the water, and it's in our blood.
Toxic chemicals linked to multiple cancers found in towns across America.
We were poisoned, and we are still poisoned.
Almost every day, there is a new community that is finding out that their water is contaminated.
America This Week relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. I'm incredibly pleased to welcome our next guest. He's the Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization and son to the President, Eric Trump, and also a good friend of mine. Let's bring that out right off the top. Eric, thank you for joining us. You know, I'm watching these polls, and we have these discussions about polls every 4 years. And if you remember 4 years ago, I said, stop watching the polls, watch the people. That's what really matters. However, talk to me about the recent move in the polls over the last 60 days. It seems to be tracking, literally seems to be tracking the coronavirus cases. What are your thoughts?
Listen, my thoughts are they try and do this every single time, Eric, and you've seen it before, and you're no stranger Washington, D.C., and exactly why they do it. And I think for the people of the country, I mean, the reason they put suppression polls out there is they think it's going to squash enthusiasm, or they think it's going to squash fundraising. It's the reason they do it every single time. If you remember, and I'll never forget a poll that we had exactly 2 weeks before Election Day in 2016. It was ABC, Washington Post, and they said that we were 13 points behind. Now, they oversampled Democrats by 11%. They oversampled many different types and groups of people in the poll. And actually, when we were looking at the poll, we said, if this is the poll, we're actually going to win, because that's how. And they do it on purpose, Eric. And you know they do it on purpose. And many of these polls are agenda-driven. And even the polls that got it most wrong in 2016, the same big news organizations are using them again in 2020, because they're effectively telling them what to say, how to poll, what they want the message to be. And again, they try and do it to dry up fundraising. They try to do it to suppress voters, to suppress enthusiasm. And I'm telling you, Eric, we are going to win in 96 days or 97 days. We are going to win this election.
You know, Eric, and I tell the audience, you need to go internals on the polls, find out what they're using, the methodology. It's called the methodology. Look at your margin of error. You can apply that to both candidates. If you look at it straight down the line in the swing states, because that's where the presidency is won and lost, in the swing states, we all know California, Illinois, and New York are going to go for the Democrat. We all know Texas is going to go for the Republican, et cetera. So you got to look at the methodology. Eric, what are the issues? Is COVID-19 one of the main issues? Because, 6 months ago, it was the economy and our security. Now, all of a sudden, it feels like COVID-19 and defunding the police are the issues. Define the issues for the Trump campaign.
Well, listen, I think there's a lot of issues. I think defunding the police is a massive issue, right? You see anarchy in the streets, and I can tell you Americans do not like when the men and women in blue are having bricks thrown at them, having pieces of PVC sharpened and hurled at them through the air. Americans fundamentally don't like that. We are a law and order society, is what my father stands for. That's what he cares about. Americans don't like paying more taxes. Biden came out 2 days ago and said, he's going to tax America $4 trillion more. So 82% of people's taxes were going to go up across this country. People don't like that. People are obviously scared of COVID, as they should be. And I think people want to hold China, frankly, accountable for the damage that they've caused to not just America, but the entire world. And my father's doing an incredible job with the vaccines. He gets zero credit for it. He's doing a great job with that. He's done a phenomenal job with testing. And, I think people do see that. But, I think people want a country that's based on law and order. I think people want to be able to go to work, have a great job, bring manufacturing back to this country, have a safe country, have a powerful military, have the best fighting machine that we have ever had, have vets that are taken care of, have a great economy, have jobs, not be ripped off by the entire world. And it's exactly what my father is focused on for the last 3.5 years. And I think he's done, Eric, I really think he's done an awesome job. I'm really proud of him.
So, Eric, and my job here is to analyze the race and talk about the race and have my audience understand what's going on. I did it in 2016. I'm going to do it again. Your father was on the offense in 2016. He was the outsider. He was looking in saying we got to change things in D.C. I'm going to look here, and I'm watching this race. We're 90-something days left until the election, and Joe Biden has been quiet. He hasn't been out in front. But your father hasn't attacked the other candidate right now. He seems to be playing a little bit of defense with COVID and a little bit of defense with defunding police. Where is the aggressive go after him the way he went after his competitors on the GOP until he was the nominee, and then Hillary Clinton when he was the nominee? Where is that attack on Biden? What do you guys think of Biden?
Well, listen, I'll certainly start with what I think of Biden. Biden called Arizona a city yesterday. 2 days ago, he called Arizona a city. You can't make this stuff up. A month ago, he said he was running for the United States Senate. He's running for the president of the United States. The guy can't get through a sentence, Eric, without fumbling, right? Even when he takes questions, he takes them from, pre-selected reporters with pre-screened questions. He's looking at teleprompters when he's doing it. The other day he was in New Hampshire and he said he was in Vermont. Right? You can't make this stuff up, and it's why his campaign is protecting him. They don't want him to go out. And then you look at a guy who's been in Washington. I'm not the youngest guy in the world. I'm not the oldest guy in the world, Eric, but the guy has been in Washington substantially longer than I've been alive, and he blames the problems of this nation, on my father. And it's really interesting. Every time he comes out, it's Trump's problem. It's Trump's problem. Well, he forgets that him and his predecessor were there, twice as long as my father has been in office right now. And he forgets that he was in Washington for 40 years outside of all of that. And, all the problems happen to fall on Donald Trump's lap, who's a business guy who came in to save this country from, the radical Democrats who would otherwise love to destroy it. And you see what they're doing in cities that they control all across the country. Look at what they're doing in Chicago, Eric. Look at what they're doing in Seattle and Portland and my own city here in New York. Look what they're doing. Look what they're focused on. It's anarchy. And I think voters are going to, they might be intimidated to say it, but I think voters are going to check that box every single time because people aren't into this stuff.
Yep. I'm going to leave it there. We ran out of time, but I'm going to use the old analogy. I mean, Muhammad Ali, Biden's pulling a rope-a-dope, and he's leaning up against it, and he's not really taking any punches. So just waiting to see what happens here going forward.
He's going to take plenty of punches, believe me. I promise you that.
Eric Trump, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Eric. See you.
Next, don't miss my one-on-one with former Deputy National Press Secretary for the Democratic Party, Jose Aristimuño. But first, as some of you know, I lost my son, my only child, to an accidental overdose. Eric Chase was a sophomore at the University of Colorado. One night he bought what he thought was a Xanax on campus. What he actually bought was a pill that looked exactly like a Xanax, but was laced with deadly fentanyl. Fentanyl is an opioid which is smuggled into the USA via those drug tunnels and other border crossings I showed you earlier in the show. Just a few tiny grains of fentanyl, much like salt, can kill a 200-pound person immediately. It's that dangerous. I have a saying I talk about when I speak to young people at schools or on stage: one pill can kill, and it did. I'm committed to shining a bright light on the opioid crisis. I will be doing a lot more investigative stuff. I'm going inside a massive drug bust. I'm headed to the cocoa fields of Colombia and Bolivia. I'll bring back the footage to show you what is really going on with drugs in America. It's big business, and you deserve to know how it's getting here and how much more we can do. Dope Inc., so to speak. It's a killer. I'll document it all for you. Stay tuned.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
Recently, I spoke with Women for Trump co-chair Pam Bondi, who was joined by Katrina Pearson and Mercedes Schlapp, senior advisors for the Trump 2020 campaign. We discussed the White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. We discussed protests and the future presidency. Take a listen. Talk to me a little bit about Kayleigh McEnany. She's, she used to tour with you, and now she's got the big seat over at the White House in the briefing room. The left likes to give her a hard time. Those reporters in that briefing room are pretty rough on her. How's she doing?
Kayleigh is hitting a home run. I talk to her often. I tell her that we're from the same hometown. I don't know if you know that. I know Kayleigh and her family. She's one of my favorite people in the world, and isn't she tough? Every woman in this country should be proud of Kayleigh McEnany. She's got a great husband, a little baby, brings her baby to work with her. That is a mom that can do it all. She's there working hard every day, and she's, again, hitting it out of the park, and she can dish it right back to the fake news. When they lie about President Trump, they make up facts. Kayleigh gives it right back to them.
Yes, she does. You know, she's a fighter, and I just remember doing those long panels on other networks where it was just nothing but hate for the candidate Trump at that point. But, you know, Kayleigh, she's a firecracker. She's absolutely somebody that I was happy to be in the trenches with and remains happy to be fighting alongside her. And the reason why they go after her, Eric, is because she dishes it right back to them. She doesn't take it the way that people have just taken it in the past. And I think she's doing a phenomenal job.
Remember, she got her training at CNN, and I think it served her well.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. In the heat of the battle. All right, guys, one quick thought. This whole idea of protesters. Pam, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you're former Attorney General of the state of Florida. The feds, President Trump says he's bringing federal officers into Portland, also possibly into Chicago. De Blasio says no way, he's going to stop them at the Holland Tunnel, I guess. Thoughts on doing so, Pam? What's the right thing to do here?
Well, and Eric, before I was Attorney General for 8 years, I was a career prosecutor since I was in my early 20s. You know that. I've never seen anything like this in my entire career, prosecuting hundreds of cases. It's turning into complete anarchy. President Trump is the law and order president. He's showing that. We have over 9,000 plus built federal buildings, statues, monuments in our country, and he will protect them.
All right, I got 30 seconds. I want to ask Katrina and Mercedes about Joe Biden's. Is he going to be tough on crime or weak on crime? But just give me 30 seconds each. Mercedes.
We just spoke with the president of the National Association of Police Organizations, and he was very clear that Joe Biden didn't even respond to them. He has no respect for them. And despite the fact that they endorsed Obama and Biden in 2008 and 2012, we saw this organization, this law enforcement organization that represents over 200,000 police officers, endorse President Trump because the president stands with our police officers who are part of saving our lives, helping out with community policing, and ensuring that we keep our communities safe.
But it wouldn't matter either way, Eric, because Joe Biden wouldn't remember what position he took on one day, and then he'll remember for tomorrow. So I think it's safe to say his silence on the anarchy is his consent.
All right, you know, we're going to leave it there, and this is how it rolls on the right there. We book Pam Bondi, and we end up with Katrina Pearson, Pam Bondi, and Mercedes Schlapp, three of my favorite people in the world. Love you guys. Thank you so much, and see you all again soon.
Good to see you. See you soon, Eric.
Bye, guys. Jose Aristimuño is the former Deputy National Press Secretary for the Democratic Party and political commentator with less than 100 days until the presidential election. The polls are telling one possible story, but as we saw in 2016, watch the people, don't watch the polls. Jose, welcome. You know, I'm looking at some of the, I think this obviously the race is going to be won. 2020 is going to be won in 6 states: Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin. I have to tell you, I'm going to agree here with you probably. I think some of the polling is concerning for the Trump campaign, but don't count your chickens before they're hatched. What say you, Jose?
100%. Eric, thank you for having me once again. Good to be with you. Look, the fact of the matter is that polls tell a story, but they might not tell a whole story. If you look at, like you just said rightfully, what happened in 2016, every poll basically gave it to Hillary Clinton, and she lost. Even though, due respect to her, she won the popular vote. But this is not about the popular vote. You got to make sure you get the electoral college. So I think what the DNC has to do, what the Biden campaign has to do, is make sure that they don't let voters think that this election is already theirs. This election is already won. People got to come out and vote. And from the Trump campaign, it is concerning that poll after poll, when you look at the way that he's handled coronavirus, he's losing. When you look at the way that he's handled race in general, he's losing. When you look at the economy, this is important. The economy, you would think Trump will be winning. The polls that I've been looking at, they're even. They're dead even between Biden and Trump. So I haven't seen him winning on pretty much any of the top issues that voters are going to care about. So he's got to change something in this next 90 days.
So let me do this. And I was really on top of this in 2016. All the polls were showing Hillary. And I kept telling viewers, telling you, stop watching the polls. Or if you're going to watch the polls, pick them apart. Every single poll that comes out, including these, Morning Consult, CNBC, CNN, Fox, whoever. Look at the methodology, and here's what happens. You look at the plus or minus, it's the margin of error for a poll. A lot of times it's 1.9 or 2%. That means 2% on each candidate. If you apply that number alone, every one of these swing states become a toss-up right now. Go one step further. Look at the methodology of who they're polling and how they poll them. Most typically, most of these polls will be D+, meaning more Democrats are polled than Republicans. Always going to be a bias towards the Democrat in these polls. Honestly, Jose, if you take 60 days ago, it was a dead heat. It was a dead heat. Now it looks like it's moving towards Joe Biden. We got 97 or 96 days left to go. Anything can happen.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And at the end of the day, the president of the United States today is Donald Trump. So he's got the advantage of, he's obviously Congress is looking to potentially do another stimulus. More money is coming into the hands of Americans. Knowing Trump, he's going to take the credit, even though it's Congress, doing the work. He wants a signature on the check. So he's going to do everything he can that he gets the credit when things are going well for the good things. And, if coronavirus is going bad and the death rate is going up, obviously he's going to look at Dr. Fauci and somebody else. That's the way Trump is. If he can do that, if he can confuse the American people, he might win re-election. Again, I'm like you. I ask people, look at the polls, in their entirety, look at the methodology, look at the margin of error, look at all those things. But what you cannot do is say to yourself, oh, we're winning in the polls, I'm not going to go out and vote. Yeah. You got to go out and vote. That's the most important thing.
What's amazing, Jose, and I got to leave here. I want to bring you back because you know what we didn't mention in this whole thing? We spent 5 minutes talking about we haven't mentioned Joe Biden, and I think that is very important. Joe Biden is somehow hanging in there without showing his face anywhere. Jose, we'd like to get you back again and talk Joe Biden next time around. Jose Aristimuño, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Never miss an episode of America This Week. Just set your DVR. We have a complete list of times and cities on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/America Bolling, all one word. We're also putting all of our shows on YouTube. So if you missed the show or want to rewatch an interview, subscribe to our YouTube channel there.
America, one nation. From Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week. America's fastest growing political show. Delivers facts, not falsehoods.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I appreciate the opportunity to clear some of it up.
Hard-edged opinions.
We can no longer rely on China to be the primary producer of so many critical products that we need at a time of crisis.
Tough topic debates.
Has the mainstream media vetted Joe Biden the way they vetted others on the right?
I just believe that all women have the right to speak their truth and that those truths should also be investigated. The end, regardless of what political party they are a part of.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Fighting COVID-19.
We're working with every single state to be able to detect outbreaks before they spread into the community.
And the path forward.
Getting back to some degree of normality, that will come. We will get over this.
America This Week investigates chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
The poisoning of America.
It's in the soils, it's in the water, and it's in our blood.
Toxic chemicals linked to multiple cancers found in towns across America.
We were poisoned, and we are still poisoned.
Almost every day, there is a new community that is finding out that their water is contaminated.
America This Week relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. There are two very different opinions about what's happening in Portland right now, so let's bring in Sinclair political commentator Amisha Cross and member of the President's National Security Education Board, host of America First on Salem Radio and Sinclair Media contributor, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Let's start with Dr. Gorka. So Portland's happening. We see what's going on with the feds. The president defends it, saying if these mayors and these cities are failing at what they're supposed to do, keeping the citizens and the businesses open and safe, it's time for the feds to move in. You agree with that, I take it, Sebastian?
Look, somebody has to protect America's citizens. And if the local Democrat-controlled governments, the local Democrat commissions of police refuse to do so, then it's up to the president. When you have federal buildings set ablaze night after night, in some cases with federal employees inside them, who's going to protect them if not the president and the FPS and the DHS forces that have been deployed? We've seen anarchy on the streets of America for more than 7 weeks. It has to end, Eric. It has to end.
And Amisha, you know, what about this issue has the left up in arms? Or what, you know, Ted Wheeler, mayor of Portland, saying, get out of my city. Why do you not want that? Why do they not want the help from the feds?
Because there's an amplification of violence that has started since the federal intervention. What we know is that Portland is largely a peaceful city. We have not heard of before, you know, recent times, any of those types of situations happening in Portland. Portland had protests for over 6.5 weeks that were largely peaceful, that were also about 40 people. Media didn't even cover these protests. When the feds came in, that's when we saw larger crowds. That's when we saw a lot of aggression used towards protesters. That's when we noticed that, hey, this President Trump, knows that his poll ratings are going down nationally, and he thinks he can win on this law and order super aggressive messaging strategy that makes it look like cities are chaotic and out of control. Well, that is his plan of coasting to re-election.
Okay, but Misha, you call it peaceful protest, and this is a really, really important point here. Breaking windows, spray painting walls of buildings, keeping people, citizens off the streets, that's not peaceful protest. Peaceful protest is having a place, saying your piece, letting the cameras roll on it, getting the message out. Portland hasn't been peaceful for 6 weeks prior to this.
Portland also didn't have an authoritarian-like regime march in until a week and a half ago to actually try to, in their own way, create these viral videos around aggression. You have these Gestapo-like tactics where people are getting snatched up, where there are people there who have been sent in by the feds, who are not identifying themselves at all, who are there in camo, who are using all types of abuses against these individuals. And quite frankly, America should be finding grave problem and grave issue with this, because it is a violation of the rights of these protesters and, quite frankly, a violation of everything that our federal government should stand for.
All right, Sebastian, you know, I'm going to agree with Amisha on one piece of this, you know, we saw earlier in the week, we saw in the NYPD in an unmarked van pull up, you know, officers weren't marked, and they were grabbing people, protesters, whatever they were, violent, Antifa, whatever, these anarchists, and they're throwing them into vans. That's got to be a little scary, too. Is there a middle ground on this?
Well, if you read the tweets from the NYPD today, everybody they arrested had outstanding warrants. I'm quite disgusted at what Amisha has just said. So Gestapo tactics, you do know you're talking about the Third Reich. I guess you don't care about the black people who've been killed since George Floyd was killed by that police officer. I guess David Dawn, I guess Officer Underwood don't matter to you. There were no DHS forces on the ground. There were no federal agents in California or Minneapolis when those men were killed. But you just don't care because you have political points to score, just like Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler. It is wrong to do that, Amisha. It's just wrong.
Final word to Amisha.
Sebastian, you can't tell me what it feels like to be someone who has grown up in a community and has lived in a community.
I didn't.
Die every single day. Yes, you are.
You're doing identity politics. You're just doing identity politics.
An argument that is problematic. I have stood by and spoke and held parents while their children were gunned down. So do not.
David Dawn. Talk to me about DHS and David Dawn. Talk to me.
Let me just finish the thought, please.
There is an economic crisis. There's a poverty crisis. We know the causes of gun violence, specifically in some of our urban communities, and they have existed for decades. This is not new. And putting federal troops in those areas is not going to stop it at all. This is not a nonpartisan fight. This is one where we need to have major economic overhaul. And I'm sorry, I don't care which party the economic overhaul comes from. We know what it takes to rebuild these communities, and it is not federal troops.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. It's a
responsible.
very, very heated topic, obviously, and we talk about it every week. And you know what? This story just continues to feed the interest of the American people, so we'll continue to bring it to you. Amisha Cross, thank you very much. Sebastian Gorka, thank you both. Every week we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Deputy Sheriff Dylan Pickle with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi was hit and killed by a vehicle at a safety checkpoint last weekend. Deputy Pickle was a Mississippi National Guard veteran. Police Officer Jonathan Shoup of the Buffalo Police Department in Washington was shot and killed during a car chase. Officer Shoup was a U.S. Coast Guard veteran and was with the department for 1 year. He is survived by his fiancée, mother, and 2 brothers. Rest in peace, officers.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, Americans. United we stand. We stand, Americans. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, American United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand American. United we stand. We stand American. United we stand.
Check this out. You can now watch America This Week on Stir. Just download the free app to your smartphone. You can also watch us on your TV with devices like Roku. Find us every Sunday at 7:30 a.m. and 11:30 p.m. on the Stir City Channel 1. You can also find all of our other episodes right there on demand. That's a wrap from the D.C. Swamp. And remember, next week, I have an amazing guest. My good friend and former colleague, Sean Hannity, will be joining me. And I'm looking forward to catching up with him. It's been a long time. Now, to end the show, it's an incredible journey that ended at the White House this week. Terry Sharp, known as Walking Marine, finished his 300-mile journey to raise awareness for veteran suicide. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. And good night, everybody.